Oh, aloha, everybody, and welcome back to a very special Christmas edition of the Metro Hana podcast. I have with me Cameron Cortez. Cameron, how are you?
Hey everybody, I am doing great. Excited for this season. Looking very festive there, Willie Paul.
Oh, thank you. This is my Christmas sweater that I've been wearing for a few years now. It is Rudolph. He's missing an eyeball. It came off in the washing machine. You're looking pretty festive yourself. I like that Santa hat.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the things we're looking forward to in this season. And what's that behind you there with the lights going on?
Yes. Ashley and I made a little Christmas light tree. Took forever. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. And it is a pain, but it was fun. So it's like the plug is behind the couch and it like is on the other side of the wall. Like I didn't plan it out correctly. And so like to turn it on, I have to like climb over, pull the couch out and like climb over all the stuff behind there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Cameron. We're talking about you. What do you do at Metro in case someone doesn't know?
Oh, I pretty much do our discipleship and connection ministries, overseeing all of our connect groups, as well as any things we're doing Bible study wise. Also helping out wherever I can, whether it be with check-in or just things doing around the church. But I've been doing it for 5 years, been loving every moment of it.
Yeah, so if you've been to our in-person services on Sunday, you have to see Cameron as you enter. He prints out your name tag. And if you like the Metro Minute questions or any of the studies that we've done, a lot of that has come from Cam. And so he's been doing a great job. And yeah, this podcast actually was your idea too.
Yeah, it's my birth child in a sense. But you've been doing a great job with it, dude. Loving how you're hosting it and just doing all the hard labor and getting it going. But really appreciate that, dude.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and thank you for we share an office together. Well, we used to share an office together, and I miss the Monday morning hangouts. But Cameron, we're talking about the message. We're talking about this past weekend's message, which was the story of Joseph. Story of Joseph was all about interruptions, and I think all of us could relate. No matter who you were, you can relate to being interrupted, because this year it felt like one long interruption with COVID, and there was like a huge hurricane thing that I completely forgot about. It feels like it was forever ago, but that was this year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This year has been full of interruptions.
Totally, full of them. I can't even begin to list out every single thing. Feels like there's something every single week at some point, but definitely a year full of them, both minor and major ones.
Yeah, both minor and major interruptions. Cameron, how have you been responding? How's your heart been as through all of the interruptions and everything?
I'll pull back the curtain a little bit on it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes bad. I mean, there's times where I feel super resilient, totally trusting in the Lord through it, just relying on Him, knowing that He's going to bring us through on it. And then there's times where I'm dark and dreary and feeling like it's the end of the world. Typically, I am a pretty routine, scheduled person. So when interruptions come, I have a hard time dealing with it, just because it screws up my day, it screws up my intention of how the flow of my week or whatnot was supposed to go, and I can get a little upset or just passive aggressive. That's how I turn into when I get interrupted.
When I first started at Metro, I didn't have an office, and we were just kind of bouncing around wherever there was like an open table, and then you said, "Hey, why don't I'll move my desk around, we can fit another desk in there, and we can share an office." And so retroactively, I'd like to apologize for what was maybe the biggest interruption in your life. Me.
Yeah, this youth director comes into my life, settles in the office, and next thing I know, there's a whole bunch of random toys in the office. And
pool noodles everywhere. You keep finding Nerf darts under your chair.
If there's one thing though I appreciate is the youth ministry is always full of snacks. So any drawer I open, there's usually some kind of candy, popcorn, or something I can munch on. So that was one welcome thing. But thank you for introducing chaos and interruptions into my life, Willie.
Yeah, in kind of in contrast to what you said about interruptions causing like a little bit of conflict in your life. I feel like if I get too stuck into a routine, or if things are going too smoothly, then I start to get a little restless. I'm like, oh, I've been doing the same thing week in and week out. And like for someone like you, it's like, oh, that's where I thrive. Like I know where I'm gonna be and when I'm gonna be there. But for me, it's like, oh, this routine is getting a little too routine for me now. Like, so I start to look for things to be interrupted. But, 2020 has been rough, even on people who welcome interruption. It was not cool or fun, but it was kind of like a new thing. And so you're trying out all these different ideas and you're seeing what sticks and what doesn't, and just trying to our best to spread the gospel and do what we want to do with COVID without being able to meet in person at church. But man, it's there have been some days where it's been really tough to trust God, to look at our current situation and say, yeah, God is still good. There's some days that are easier than others, and I'm sure that Joseph felt that way. Joseph was a pretty young dude, gonna get married, and then his wife to be says, I'm pregnant, and also it's God's child. And Joseph is like, yeah, 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 yeah. Perfect. That makes complete sense.
And I think back to when I was getting ready for marriage and whatnot, and just the chaos of that time and season of preparing for the wedding and whatnot. And just to imagine what a major interruption, like, wait, you mean my bride to be is pregnant and the child's not mine? What kind of wrench that would have thrown into every single plan and every single expectation. And I definitely resonate with Joseph in that sense, where he quietly decides to divorce her in that
Mm.
moment, just because, man, we built all this up. We have all these expectations. The venue's booked. I don't know if I want to go through with this now. And I just find it quite remarkable that rather than just throwing her for public ridicule, he actually quietly says, "No, I'm just gonna kind of let this go." But that's not how the story goes, is it, huh, Willie?
No, so he makes up in his mind, all right, I'm gonna quietly uh split up, not make a big deal out of it. But then an angel appears and is just says, hey Joseph, it's all good. Her story is legit, it checks out. You are supposed to raise this child as your own, and this child is like the Messiah. He's gonna be the savior of everyone. And so Joseph is like, okay, my original plan of marrying Mary got interrupted, but now my second backup plan of splitting is interrupted. And so it's now back to the original plan. And, you know, I was writing the Alive video, and I was reading in Matthew. I was reading Matthew, and Joseph makes up his mind. He's like, okay, I'm going to split up. And then the angel tells him three sentences. Three sentences. They're like, no, marry her. This kid is Jesus, all these things. And then that's all that we know for until Jesus is born.
Mhm.
And so I can't imagine like the 9 months of going through like the whispers as you go to the grocery store, or the shunning from family members of like, what are you doing? The conversation with his friends or coworkers of like, dude, what are you doing? But Joseph holds to those three sentences from the messenger of God, and he's just so sure and so trusting in God that he goes through it. And because of that, we have Jesus, the story of Jesus. And it makes me think of this whole big long interruption of 2020, and how there have been times where it feels like God is silent, and it's just like, man, God, I am praying, I am like reading, I am doing everything that I thought I was supposed to do, and it's just, where are you? And it makes me think of the faith of Joseph
Yeah,
when
and those three sentences you're talking about, I think one of them was, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, Joseph." And that sentence actually really hit me leading up to my marriage, because there was a lot of like fear and anxiety going into like, oh my gosh, I'm saying yes to one person the rest of my life. Am I sure on this? Like, how is this gonna go and whatnot? And it was those exact words that spoke to me during my season of uncertainty, going into engagement and into marriage. Do not be afraid to take her as your wife. And I just thought, wow, how powerful that must have been for Joseph to hear, to hold on to and to cling into. And even for us too, in this time that we're in this major or minor interruption we find ourselves in, like, don't be afraid. Like, God is with us in that sense. And I think that's such a beautiful thing for the angel to tell Joseph in that moment.
Yeah. I didn't know that. You never told me that story.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's cute. uh, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. I was just caught off guard by that little cute story you just shared.
Oh, no worries, man. I'm sure my wife will appreciate me sharing that.
Okay, let's get back on the train of thought. Uh, Pastor Brandon shared about the Good Samaritan and what is Jesus's example of how to respond to interruption. So, quick recap: two church leaders are walking down a road and they see this dude who got beat up, and they just pass by him. They go on the other side of the street. They pretend you don't see him. And then a Samaritan who, in that time, was like a lower, very low on the like social totem pole, walks past and stops and takes him to a hotel and is like, I'm going to heal him, and if there's any debt when I come back, I'll pay it. And it's about being a neighbor. Um, Cameron, how do you handle interruptions, big or small, in a way that honors God?
Yeah, the beautiful thing I notice about this Luke 10:31 through 35 passage is Jesus tells this parable and this story of the Good Samaritan, and it's radical for the listeners because, in their views, a Samaritan was the enemy. That's a half breed. That's somebody that we don't associate with. And for that person to be the hero in this story is quite remarkable for the listener. So for them to notice that, hey, this guy is treating somebody more like how Jesus would or how we should treat somebody is almost as if someone were to tell the story of the good Nazi or the good communist, if you want to go on that route. Like, people are shocked to hear that someone who is a political enemy even of that time is showing grace and mercy and looking more like Jesus than they expected. So when I think of this, I definitely fall sometimes in line with the priest or the Levite, where I don't want to be taken off of my schedule routine. I don't want an interruption. Like, God, don't you dare interrupt me in this moment. I'm on a mission. I'm on the mission you gave me. How can I be interrupted in this moment, even by you? And
Mm,
it's really kind of a convicting thing for me to process and think through, where if I'm so caught up in my perceived mission or my perceived goal that I have and am blind to what God has right before me, I can miss it. I can totally just be like the priest and the Levite in this story and miss it completely. So I I definitely am convicted by this story oftentimes.
mm. Yeah, something that this story always makes me think of is we always pray for like divine intervention, but reject divine interruption. And so there could be moments where we're going up, we're like, all right, I've got my schedule or what I think is supposed to be my schedule. And then God is like, okay, and here's divine intervention. Here's what you need. Here's what you've been asking for. And we're so locked into what we think is, oh, God's calling me over here. I'm supposed to go this way. And when God is like, hey, no, actually, there's something over here for you, we're like, nope, that is a distraction. That is an interruption. Uh, so I've been trying to be more open to interruptions in my schedule, in my day to day. Like Pastor Brandon said, not in a way that's like I'm stopping every 5 minutes driving my car, you know, but in a way that's like I can make an impact here, and if I'm able to make whether it's my friend group, my social circle, the places that I go, if I can make it look a little more like heaven, if that costs me a little time, a little energy, a little interruption, I think that's worth it.
Yeah, totally. And I think in order to do that, we need to have something what's called margins in our life.
Mm,
And if I'm the type of person where I can schedule every minute of my day and I'll be hyper efficient and just slam in all the way till I'm done with work or done with the day. And though that seems really good, I know it is all my plans and my idea of how the day should go, and doesn't leave room for God to interrupt, because
mm,
I'll be tunnel visioned, or like I sometimes tell people, I'm like a freight train that doesn't stop until it gets to its destination sometimes. And though that can be efficient and effective, that sometimes isn't what God wants you to do. I think of Forrest Gump in his movie when he's running with the football and then he's going in the wrong direction, or he just keeps going, the crowd has to tell him to stop. I can sometimes be like that, where I lock into a particular task, and everything else around me just kind of goes away. I think branding sometimes calls it, oh, work cam is out. And when work
yeah.
cam is out, get out of his way kind
Oh,
of
I've
thing.
seen work cam a couple times. It's scary.
Yeah, and that's honestly not the type of person I want to be. Like I hear that sometimes and we joke and laugh, but I realize that's definitely not God's heart. That is not how Jesus created me to be, and it's more out of like selfish ambition than it is out of glorifying God or being open to what He has.
Mm.
So I think for me, especially, having those margins so that there are times where there is downtime or there is enough um, room in order to have God move in it.
Now explain what you mean by margins, because oftentimes I've heard that kind of like as a buzzword being thrown around lately, and it just makes me think of being back in elementary school and like stay within the margins, you know?
Well, kind of along those same lines, right? If you write on a page and you don't have margins on it, you write to the edge to edge of every single page, it gets really crowded and there's no room for anything else. Margins in our life are times where we specifically cut out so that we can either hear from the Lord, or there's nothing scheduled necessarily, or it's almost like rest and downtime to allow for God to move. And sometimes that margin gets covered up by something else, whether a work project or something spills over, or a divine interruption takes it up. But at least it was portioned out rather than slammed in and having to completely interrupt your entire day in a
Mm.
sense.
So the idea of margin is just to schedule downtime and schedule a time where you're able to uh, be interrupted, or a time where you're able to listen for God without anything else like work or responsibilities that we can get caught up in.
Yeah. And I think of it sometimes, if I schedule every single minute down to the T, I mean there's no trusting God in it. Like I know exactly what my day is gonna look like. I know exactly where I need to be and how to be there. And it's almost like, no, I got this. I've scheduled this, God.
Mm,
I'm good for today. And it's something I had to learn, because I used to schedule everything down so tightly close that if I was late by traffic or late by something, it would push back everything in my day.
seriously?
Yeah, I used to get like that. And I'd forget to leave room for eating, or I'd forget to leave room for something here or there, and I would totally screw up my day.
Dang, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. It can get like
God,
that sometimes.
the moral of the story, moral of the story is leave time in your life where you are able to be interrupted by God, whether that's divine intervention or divine interruption. Uh, we're not saying like it has to be a whole day or like a whole week, but just small points throughout the day where it's all right, 10 minutes when I wake up or before I go to sleep. I'm just gonna have maybe nothing to do. I'm gonna read the Bible. I'm gonna pray, maybe listen to a few songs of worship, and just take care of my soul and see what God is speaking to me. Cam, there was a big divine interruption in Joseph's life. And now, thousands of years later, we call this time Advent. And you can't spell adventure without Advent. And so together we're going to be going on an adventure of Advent. And so there's 4 weeks. Cam, if you don't know, is very learned. He's a biblical scholar in every sense of the word. And so he's going to be taking us through the 4 weeks of Advent. And week number 1 is
Hope.
hope.
I'd like to classify that I am a amateur biblical scholar. I do this for fun mostly. I am by no means a actual one. But
I mean, you're probably the
yes.
smartest dude that I know.
Oh,
So
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, Advent, if any of you are part of a traditional, we're a part of a traditional church or in some form of liturgy, might be familiar to. But the word Advent actually comes from the meaning of the word arrival. And the season of Advent is essentially this time we get to prepare our hearts for the coming or the arrival of our Savior Jesus Christ. And as Willie Paul mentioned, the weeks leading up to Christmas are this like scheduled time where we can kind of reflect on a themed word for that week to kind of help us prepare for Christmas. And this week we're going to be kind of riffing on the word hope. And if you think about it, the entire Advent season is a season of hope and of waiting and of anticipation for the Messiah. We're gonna post some things on our Metro Minute and some of our social media platforms regarding this, but we'd really love for you to take this content to study with your families, with your Connect group, or even take it as a personal devotional to look up what is actually biblical hope. And through each topic in this series, we're going to touch on one of these words. And we've linked a Bible Project video for you to watch to kind of help you define what it is. And there's some follow-up questions for you to either journal on or to talk with even your kids or with your groups of just what is biblical hope and what does that mean during this time.
So, Cam, what is biblical hope?
I'm glad you asked that, Willie.
Yeah, why don't you flex those brain muscles for a second?
For any of you who know me, I really like looking at the original Greek and Hebrew language that the Bible was written in. And the original languages are just have an extra insight as far as what these words actually could mean. Some things are lost in translation from their move into English. And it's helpful for us to kind of see what the either author's original intent for these words were actually. In a lot of senses, when we say hope in modern times, it's more like wishful thinking. It's more like, I hope this will happen, or I hope this next year will be better, or it's almost
hope
like
I get a PS5 for Christmas.
Oh, me too, man.
I want to play Spider-Man.
But when we look at the biblical word for hope, it is not wishful thinking. It is hopeful expectation. And there's a sense of absolute certainty that's behind the biblical words of hope. The Hebrew has two words. It's yachal and kavah. Those are the two words they use for hope. And in the Greek, the word for hope is elpis. Elpis and kavah, they both have a, Elpis and yachol, they both have a connotation of waiting. and it's a expectant waiting that something's going to come. And they're very similar in that sense. But the word for kava is particularly interesting for me because it has the connotation of three cords being stretched. It's almost like a rope that's being pulled tight.
Hmm.
And the really interesting thing that the Bible Project video talks about is that when there's this tension in the rope that's being pulled taut, to kava with the idea of hope coming is the release of that tension. So in the word kava, there's this like almost tense atmosphere or tense expectation of what's to come. And then when kava happens, it's released. And that's the idea of what happens with hope. To kind of like bring it contextually for us, Willie, back when we were fishing, remember when our lines would get taut and we'd have a kava moment in that sense. That's when the lines are tense and we're hoping that there's a fish on the line. More often than not, it was a rock.
Yep.
But when when the fish finally comes up, when the tension is released, when the pull is with the what 3 pound papio that's on the end of it, that's the kava that happens where we the tension is done kind of in that sense, and that's
Mm.
the idea behind these biblical words surrounding hope.
So how does that translate into how we live our lives now? Because it feels like we all are kind of in tension, whether it's with lockdowns or politics or just trying to go and hang out with people. And there's like different restrictions and all of that. We're all kind of tense right now. So how do we have that moment of ah?
Yeah, Willie, I wish I knew the answer for you. I'm kidding. um, the times when I realized that kava is not in the things of this world, or when I'm searching for hope in something other than God or placing it outside of Jesus, that's the times where I am most uneasy, I noticed.
Mm,
It's those moments where my hope is being found in something else, and that hope is going to be empty in a lot of ways. um, when I was processing through this and just even writing a short devotional on it, I was hit with the fact that if God were to answer every single one of my prayers from here till eternity, that still would not fulfill me at all. I still will have that tension.
mm,
Even if everything were to turn the way I wanted, everything was to work out, that tension would still exist. That tension is not going to be released, and we won't experience true kava until Christ comes again. And that's what this Advent season kind of prepares us for. It's to develop a sense and a longing for Christ's second advent that he's promised. And it's not a wishful hope that, oh, I hope Jesus comes again. There's a assurance that he is coming, and he's promised it and he will fulfill it. And that's what we're waiting for. That's what we are yachal kava and elpising in this life that we find ourselves in, that we find our hope in and from Jesus alone.
mm. That's good, man. It's that idea of that more is never enough. Of like, even if I had the biggest house and the nicest cars and I caught the biggest fish, uh, I'd still be, I'd still have that tension. And
Mhm.
so it's the idea of being able to rest and create the margins and allow God to interrupt our lives, where we find true assurance, not just wishful thinking, but true assurance in knowing that God is good.
Yeah, that's where it's at, man.
That's where it's at. Anyway, we invite you to watch this Bible Project video. Highly recommend it. And to join us as we continue to explore Advent and what it means to us as followers of Jesus in this year, in this time, where hope is in short supply, but uh, God is the God of hope, And so we can always go to him, go to the source, and he'll be able to give us the hope that we need. Cameron, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Willie.
I'm excited for this Advent time. It's going to be really good. We'll see you next week on the Hana podcast.
Hello, everyone.
Shoots, everybody.